Welcome back to the Weekend Show. Joining me now, Mr. Gabriel Specter, who will be speaking to us about the several human rights abuses occurred over the year. As we said during the headlines, Nigeria experienced an uproar when the Amnesty International released a report that damned the Nigerian army for its human rights abuses against the Nigerian people. On today's program, we'll be talking about freedom of speech, freedom of right of movement, rights of persons, for dignity of human rights, of rights to freedom of dignity of human persons, rights to freedom from discrimination on the grounds of sex, race, tribe, creed, or political opinion or association. Gabriel, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
You're most welcome. So when you hear about these human rights abuses occurring in Nigeria, what comes to mind? How do we solve or curtail this issue?
Okay, basically, first, thank you for having me once again. And basically, we have a constitution that has spelled out, in clear terms, the provision for us to live as a people and live orderly and be governed, right? And we've had, over years, people who have been able to interpret the laws. We have, the legal practitioners who have done a good job, in my opinion, in trying to help us understand some of these provisions in the Constitution, all right? I must say that I am not a legal practitioner. I'm a broadcaster. But then, over the years, we've been able to, as a nation, study with different examples we've had over time, the various different aspects of the Constitution that provides for human rights existence in the country. And narrowing down to this government, to this current administration, I really think that not so much has been done, in appreciating the presence of human rights, fundamental human rights in the country. I mean, we take to mind different examples from the last 3 years. Now, I must say that this issue of human rights abuse is not one that's just about the current administration. Even want to go back into the previous administrations, like they like to say 16 years of the PDP rule, we can take one or two examples also.
Who likes to say?
I mean, some people say that, 16 years of the PDP reign and things like that. But it's not about one government. I think it's a fundamental problem by people who are placed into offices who fail to realize and understand that you just can't trample on people's human rights.
So since the advent of our democracy in 1999 till date, do you believe we're getting better in terms of respect of human rights, or do you believe it's getting worse in Nigeria?
I sincerely think that we're not, if we're growing, it's at a crawling pace. Do you understand? I mean, we have someone who is the #1 man in the country come out and say and said that national security, supersedes the rule of law. And I wonder how that is possible, because you can't have national security outside the parameters of the rule of law. As a matter of fact, the rule of law determines and helps understand, how far or the provisions for national security. But we hear these things come out, and we also see people who are supposed to be chief officers of, who are supposed to help us understand further, these provisions in the Constitution. And then we hear some comments from these people. So you wonder, are we really growing? If you ask me, I don't think we are doing so well in terms of growth in appreciating human rights. I mean, we've seen several examples only in this year, all right? Just of recent, Deja Adinyoju, the activist, was apprehended. I was even reading up on it as of yesterday. He's right about now, he has been remanded in court, rather in prison, until February next year for a matter that he has been acquitted and discharged as of 2009 by a state high court. Thankfully, the judge of the magistrate did mention that he is not, doesn't have the competence to rule on that case, all right? But then, talking to one or two legal practitioners who I have as friends, they did mention that you can't have somebody, you can't try somebody on a case twice, particularly if the person has been acquitted and discharged. So,
Double
you know,
jeopardy.
do you understand? So it brings to mind how far are we going? And then we see different other examples. You know, we talk about the freedom of speech, and we see the place of you know, journalists. All right, in the media. The media is the third force, is the bridge between the government and the people. The people may never know what is going on, what those guys are up to. But thankfully, the media has been able to bridge that gap, bringing the information that this is what these guys are up to, create platforms for people to engage the government. All right, but we see people, many in Nigeria today, I tell you, many journalists are scared, are afraid to dabble, to attempt investigative journalism. The ones that do, they have to hide to do them. A government cannot grow successfully if people, you know, people are not able to express themselves. Not just express themselves, they have been given the right to express themselves.
I do agree that the media is the fourth realm of the state, and we do have a responsibility to be gatekeepers of our democracy.
Now, let's talk about the people. I know people are very quick. Citizens are quick to cast aspersions at government. But let's look at citizens. How well do citizens know their rights, from your point of view?
Well, I sincerely think that not a lot has been done in enlightening the people about, you know, their rights. Because, for example, I'll just give you a simple case of when we had this issue of the FSARS, you know, people, for a typical example, a man is caught on the road, you know, wearing dreads or something, you know, and the police goes to meet the person and just believes the person is a fraudster. Now, there are big chances the person may not be a fraudster. The person may even be a banker. I don't know if bankers are allowed to, you know, wear dreads into the banking hall or something. But what I'm trying to say is, eventually, bail, for example, is free. It has been said over and over again. But people pay money to get bailed.
I even thought the angle you're leading at was the fact that a SARS official can stop you, ask you to come out of your car and cut your hair.
That's just one of the very many examples.
Yeah.
A SARS official will go to you to the ATM point, wait at your back, and have you withdraw the money you're going to pay to them.
But as citizens, we know this is a bridge of our human rights. So how do we respond to scenarios like that, knowing these are armed men, knowing that our lives are under threat, you know, in scenarios like this? Do we defend our human rights, or do we just sit back and let it happen?
We need to, first and foremost, knowledge is power. So the citizens we as the citizens, we need to come out and make more efforts, conscious efforts, be intentional about understanding our rights. Now, you know, many people actually believe that in trying to understand these things, they are far-fetched, all right? And I also think that perhaps the judiciary, you know, people who have actually taken out time to study and understand these things, they should do more in trying to enlighten the people that these and these and these are your human rights. Because it will go a long way in helping the citizens, you know, fight for their rights. If a policeman comes to meet me, or a SARS official, thankfully, I don't think these things still happen after the reform we had and everything. The new commission of the police service, the new, commission of the police service commission, its new members of the board of directors and stuff like that. I think they've been doing quite a lot in trying to reform the FSARS unit of the police, Nigeria Police Force and everything. But I think more needs to be done. Even the police, if they're truly sincere, I mean, from its leadership, they're truly sincere in not just saying that the citizens have human rights and we should not pay attention to police officers who try to trample on rights. Not just police officers, it cuts across board, all right? They should do more than talking and institute training centers, engaging the people. These are your rights. You know, make the people, because I don't think an average Nigerian wants to bother about going to read up on what my rights are.
And speaking of that, speaking of teaching the people what their rights are, we have a couple to read out. Here are your human rights, Nigerians. Right to life, right to freedom of movement, right to freedom of dignity of human persons. I think that could have easily been worded to rights to freedom of dignity. The right to freedom from discrimination on the grounds of sex, race, tribe, creed, or political opinion or association. So the Nigerian law, about 14 years in jail for those people who practice homosexuality is already a trample of human rights, but that's another issue for another time. Right to fair and equal hearing, right to private and family life, right to freedom of expression and the press, right to freedom of thought, conscience, and religion, right to peaceful assembly or association. So, Gabriel, in your opinion, how many of these rights do you believe we can freely exercise as citizens of this great nation?
I
like that response.
I really have to scoff into that because really, I think as a nation, we have not done so well in observing these rights. We've not done so well. Anything goes in Nigeria. We can't continue to live like that. If we have the first #1 man in the country say that national security, what else are we talking about? I mean, it was a comment. The NBA had to come out, to issue a statement against it. If the #1 man, I don't know what other thing. We've seen the, the continuous detention of El Zakzaki, all right? Continuous detention of Dasuki. Now, these people have been granted, Dasuki, for example, by 6 different courts. He's still being detained because some people believe that his detention, or rather his freedom, is a threat to national security. If that is your submission, why didn't you tender it at the court of law? If the court of law sees that, okay, this is valid, perhaps they wouldn't have granted the bail. But they say that, okay, well, we don't see this case as, valid, and we are granting this man bail. But you say, no, we want to keep him. So I mean, if that can happen from the people who are supposed to be upholders primarily of the rule of law in governing human rights, then I don't see what other thing we're talking about. Anything goes in Nigeria. People do anything anyhow.
But let me ask you this. What do you think, or what should be, the role of security agencies? Now, we're talking about security agencies across board. What should be their role in ensuring that the rights of Nigerians, ordinary citizens, are not trampled on?
They are law enforcers. They enforce the law. For example, the police and if, for example, there is a particular high-profile politician, right, who has loads of money, is multi-billionaire, and is trying to, for some reasons, cheat, if I can use that word, cheat a Nigerian of a lower class or something. Now, it is the policeman. First and foremost, I would ask, how many policemen understand these provisions? They themselves, as the law enforcers, how many of them really understand these provisions? It takes a man who understands it, first and foremost. Because before you're a policeman, you're first a Nigerian. Before you're a broadcaster, you're first a Nigerian. So, primarily, how many of us really understand that these are my rights as a citizen of this country? So, moving forward, as a policeman or as a lawyer, as a security operative, how many of them really understand? Amnesty International released reports, accusing the federal government and the Nigerian army of crimes against humanity in the country. Now, that is scary. It's scary. We're talking about the Nigerian army that defends the territory of the nation. Not just now. Listen, this report that was released to the ICC was against both the Boko Haram and the Nigerian army. Do you understand? Both. I mean, the Boko Haram that...
To classify them in the same category.
In the same category.
It's truly heartbreaking, and I do really want to use this opportunity to call on our federal government as well as our security agencies to adhere to the rule of law, protect, defend, which you have pledged to, the rights of every Nigerian, irrespective of tribe, irrespective of political affiliation, and irrespective of religion. It's very important. And as we move into 2019, I would implore you to change your ways. According to Amnesty International, 3,614 persons have been killed from the farmers-herders clash alone in the past 3 years. 57% of that number was killed in just last year. So these are very disturbing statistics that I believe we need to look into more and see what we're doing as a people, the security agencies, the federal government, to curtail this. But Gabriel, thank you so much for joining us on today's program. That's a fine place to leave it. We'll take a break right now. When we return, we'll bring you the sports segment of the weekend show. Don't go anywhere.